In this movie, I want to talk about using Revit template files to create your project file. Now, you're probably ready to get started and actually start creating an actual Revit project. And I should point out that Revit projects are contained in a single project file. That file is often based on a template. Now, there's some sample templates that come with the software, and these might vary depending on your jurisdiction and what country you're in and what options you've installed. And so the ones that I'm going to show you are just examples. I'm working with the default United States version of Revit, and so mine has installed both Imperial and metric templates. And I'm going to show you an example of each one. Now, you can access template files in a couple different ways. We can certainly get there using the application menu, the New command, and choose New Project. That will display the New Project dialog. Also, if you happen to be looking at the recent files screen, then everything that you can do in the application menu is also reiterated right here under projects. And we talked about this in a previous movie. So this new link right here would open the same dialog. And then there's a few template files listed here, which if you watch the movie on configuring your options, you know you can actually customize that list and point to any template files that you use frequently. That same list will appear right here on this small dropdown. So any template that you use on a regular basis, you really ought to add to that list. Now, what I'm going to start with is the default metric template. Now, in the US installation, I actually had to add that to my list. If you don't see that on your dropdown, you can click the Browse button here and you can locate that file. Now, I've got a folder here called US Metric, and you can see that there's several different metric templates available in here, and that's just the default metric one that I'm opening right now. So when I click OK, it will create a new project file based on that default metric template. Now, this is a really simple template. It's just basically a no frills, just get me started in Revit kind of template. So when you look over here on the project browser, it's got some floor plans, some ceiling plans, and a few elevations. It doesn't have any legends, any schedules, any sheets, and there are some families available naturally. All Revit projects include some families. This is a really basic starting point. Now, you can start here and you can build any project you like, and we're going to do that in a future movie, taking this file and building up our project file from it. But let me contrast this to a couple other example template files. Now, some of the template files I'm going to show you are going to be metric units, some are imperial. So I'm not really too concerned about the units per se. I'm more concerned with the actual features that you can include in a template. For example, you can add other views to your template. You can add schedules and legends to your template. You can even add default sheets. So let's look at some of those examples. I'm going to go to the application menu, go to New, and choose Project again. I'm going to click Browse, and I'm in the US Imperial folder right now. But I'm going to step back one step here, go to US Metric, and let's open up this one here, this construction default metric. Now, if you don't have access to this file, you can watch what I'm doing here or follow along with a different file. Let me go ahead and click Open and then OK. Now, the on-screen view looks pretty much the same, but if you look over at the project browser, what you're now going to notice is there's a couple more floor plan views available. And the reason for that is if I open up one of the elevations, you can see that there's more levels available in this project. So there's a level for the bottom of the footing and for the top of the footing and the slab, level 1 and level 2. If I switch back to my default project, the one that only had the few floor plans, you can see that that one only had level 1 and level 2. So that's the difference, is that that other project started with more levels. Now we're going to talk about adding levels in a future movie. So for right now, I'm not going to worry too much about how those levels got there. Now, back over here in this project, another thing that makes this one slightly unique is that notice that there's a plus sign next to schedules and quantities. So if I expand that, what you're going to see is there's lots of schedules that are already available here on this list. So for example, there's one here called door quantities, and I'm going to open that up. Now, that displays an empty schedule. So you say, well, that's not very exciting. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a couple doors to this project so we can start to see how this schedule behaves. So I'm going to come up here to the floor plans, open up the level 1 floor plan, and you can't just add a door. You have to first add a wall. So let me go ahead and click the wall command. I'll just draw a little segment of wall here. Click my modify tool to cancel. Then I'll go to the door command, and you can place 2 or 3 or 4 doors. It doesn't really matter how many. It doesn't really matter where you place them. But notice that you can't place a door in empty space. It has to be hosted to a wall. And we'll talk more about that in the future. Let me zoom in with my wheel. And I'm going to go ahead and select the first door here, scroll down. That's door number 1. This one's door number 2, and that one is door number 3. Okay, so we've just placed 3 very simple doors. Now, if I scroll back down and reopen my door quantity schedule, you'll now see that there's a line item here in the schedule. And instead of showing 3 separate lines, what you're going to see here is there's a quantity of 3 in the count column. So the reason it's showing that is because all 3 of those doors were the same kind of door. And so this schedule is concerned with how many of each kind of door you have. So if I went back to level 1 floor plan and I took one of these doors and I changed it to some other type of door, and then we return to that schedule, you'll see I just get 2 line items. I have one of the one type and one of another type. And again, the specifics of the types you choose isn't really that important. It's just understanding what's different about this particular template. So the real important aspect of this template, and we've only looked at one, but there are all these different schedules which are designed to immediately give you quantities and information about your model as you're building it. So as you add walls, as you add doors, as you add other geometry, those items will automatically be populating these various schedules, giving us very useful information. Now, there are other templates available. So I'm going to make another new project. I'm going to click Browse again. And this time I'm going to look at one that's here in the US Imperial folder. And again, the units aren't important to our discussion right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and open that up and click OK. This is the commercial default. And what I want to point out here is what's slightly different is these are the elevation symbols. You can see that's the west elevation, but it's got the number 2 here and A5. And if I zoom back out and over here, this one has number 1, elevation south, and A4. So what is that referring to? Well, here are my 4 elevations, east, north, south, and west. But if I scroll down a little bit further, you'll notice that there are several sheets that are already available in this template. Right here, we can see that there's an A4 sheet for elevations that has the north and south elevation. And right here is an A5 that has the east and west elevation. And what that means is if you actually open one of these sheets, like the A4 elevations, you can see that both of those views are already displayed here on the sheet. Now, in order to see something happen there, we would go back to our level 1, for example. Let me just zoom out just a touch. And as long as I build my model in the middle of those 4 elevation symbols, it will automatically show up on that sheet in each of those elevations. So I'm going to click over here on my wall tool. And again, the specifics of the wall tool will be coming in a future movie. But let me just go ahead and click the rectangle icon here and just make a random rectangle, cancel out of the command, and I'll add a door here in the south elevation. Now I'm doing that just for orientation purposes. Let's go back to the Sheets branch now, and I'm going to open up the A4 elevations again. And notice that that wall shows here the north elevation without a door, and then here the south elevation with the door displaying right there. So one of the advantages of setting up a template that has pre-built schedules or pre-built sheets is that you can have your project team just get started right away and start drawing. And as long as they draw right in that central area of the screen, they're already creating elements that are going to show up on views, they're going to show up on sheets, they're going to show up in schedules, and the team is able to get useful information and feedback from their project right away without having to do an enormous amount of setup. Now, a template can't solve all setup tasks. There will always be some setup that you have to do, but it can certainly shorten some of that. Now, later in this chapter, we're going to create a brand new project from scratch that's going to become our project that we're going to work with throughout the remainder of the course. We're going to do a lot of the setup in that project on our own. However, if you start with a template, as you saw here, we can shorthand some of that setup. And that's largely what's going to happen in the experience you're going to have in most of your work working in your firm, because most likely your firm has an office standard template. But by going through this movie and going through the other movies in this chapter, you can see what happens when you do it either way, either starting from scratch or starting with the template, and you can kind of compare and contrast the two experiences. But starting with a template is a highly recommended way to get started with a Revit project because it definitely helps you shorthand a lot of that setup right from the beginning.